This has been a week filled with darkness. The most terrible and tragic and frightening week of my lifetime as a Memphian. The abduction and murder of Liza Fletcher, who was not a member of Temple, but who was a part of the lives of so many in this community. From her classmates and friends from childhood, to those who played soccer with her for Purple Rain, to Liza's colleagues and students as a junior kindergarten teacher at St. Mary's. She was Miss Fletcher to some of our very own Temple families. Those who knew her personally, or those of us who learned of her radiance, her gentleness, her generosity of spirit, those of us who only first heard of her this week, all of us, we all grieve for her life that ended before its time. We grieve for her family, for her husband, for her children, for all the light that she brought into this world that now can only be reflected by the people she touched and loved. And then Wednesday night, the indiscriminate shooting and killing broadcast on Facebook Live for all the world to see, forcing us to shelter in place and ending with 4 dead and 3 others wounded. This week leaves us with so many questions. How could one human being be capable of inflicting so much violence and pain? How could we as a community and a society create the conditions for something like this to happen? And where was God in Memphis this week? In our Haftarah, our Haftorah reading from this Shabbat, from the book of Isaiah, God tells the Jewish people, B'shetzef ketzef histarti panai, rega mimecha. For a moment, out of anger, I hid my face from you. And sometimes in our world, in our lives, when men do unspeakable evil, it does feel as if God is in hiding, like God is nowhere to be found. If God is there, if God loves us, how could something like this happen? In the darkest place in our own people's history, Auschwitz, many people lamented this same conundrum. And one Jewish theologian, Richard Rubinstein, famously believed that the only explanation was that God died alongside the Jews in the camps. But the British theologian, Melissa Raphael, she writes that God did not die, but that the Nazis' evil repelled and expelled God from that place, made Auschwitz a godless place. In her book, her deeply moving book, The Female Face of God in Auschwitz, she says that human beings have the power, as our Haftarah says this week, to lock God out of the world, to force God into hiding. And yet, to Raphael, God was present. God was there every day in Auschwitz, even though the Nazis nearly locked God out of the world. The Jewish prisoners, when they treated each other with love, when they offered a fellow prisoner a morsel of bread, even though they themselves were starving, when they offered comfort to a fellow prisoner, even though they too were suffering, when they looked at their fellow and saw them not as just a number, but as a fellow human being made B'Tselem Elohim, in the image of God, that they brought God back into the world. Even though they were prisoners, even though they had no power, they made space for God where God had been shut out. And here in Memphis, we have that power too. At 4:30 this morning, in the middle of the night, thousands of runners, not just runners, but walkers and candle holders, thousands gathered at the place Liza was taken to finish Liza's run. Thousands of Memphians gathered to say that Liza's life mattered, that our city is filled with more love than hate, that though we are grieving, we are not grieving alone. We as a city and we as a Jewish people have been through dark and terrible times before. The Lorraine Motel, Auschwitz, and yet we are still here. And we as Jews come together each and every week to read that holy book, the Torah, which has been passed down from generation to generation, which survived the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem and the Crusades and the death camps. But we come together to read this Torah not just to continue to exist, not just to survive, but to teach ourselves and to teach the world its central message. As Rabbi Akiva taught 2,000 years ago, what is the central teaching of the Torah? From the book of Leviticus, from the very center of the Torah, the commandment, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. That love, that is our role and our responsibility as Jews. To be an or legoyim, a light unto the nations. To bring light where there is only darkness. To bring love where there is only hatred. And to bring God where there is only evil. And thankfully, our Haftarah does not end with God hiding God's face. It continues in slight anger for just a moment. For just a moment I hid my face from you. But with kindness everlasting I will take you back in love, said Adonai your Redeemer. For the mountains may move and the hills be shaken, but my loyalty shall never move from you, nor my covenant of friendship be shaken, said Adonai our God, who takes you back in love. God may return with love, but God can only do so with our love, through our love for one another. We, each one of us, can welcome God back into this world, one act of love at a time. In the words of Martin Luther King, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. And hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will.
chesed yibane, yadadai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed yibane, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed yibane, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed yibane, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. And I will build this world from love, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. And you must build this world from love, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. And if we build this world from love, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai, then God will build this world from love, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai. Olam chesed yibane, yadadai, dai, dai, yadadai, dai.